first one that you're slideshow?
Yeah. I mean, if you can get the slideshow in the chat, get the chat too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that.
No, I don't think so. I just
More than-
needed to know that you were here.
Oh, yes. So you can use this
Okay,
right
so
here.
do you want to get started? And other people join us?
This round.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, first I want to say thank you all for coming to this session. This is entitled Pictorial and Verbal Explanations of Air Changes After Heating, and it's being presented to you by, I'm just going to call her Irene, and I'll let her say her last name, and Nicos. So we're thrilled to have you all here at the museum. I think when you came in, you saw where the refreshments were set up just outside the door, and restrooms are just past the staircase. So if you need help finding any of those amenities, please just ask someone that's out in the hallway. If you have your cell phones, please turn them off so they don't disturb our presenters. And there's an evaluation card at each one of your places, so if you could please fill that out at the end of the session, we would certainly appreciate the feedback. This helps us to know how to do things better in the future, and it gives a little feedback for our presenters. So thank you again, and please help me give a warm welcome to our presenters, Irene and Nicos.
Thank you for coming. Our topic today is related with the particulate nature of matter. And as you know, I'm Irene. I'm a PhD student in Frederick University. Firstly, I'm going to discuss why we choose to deal with such a topic. As you know, particulate theory of matter, it's a science curriculum that they teach around the world, even in physics, chemistry, or biology. Analytic programs introduce this topic around 8th and 9th grade, while some notions, for example, the matter is introduced in elementary level. Also, this topic also a reduced interest of early philosophers and different researchers. For example, around 44 and 34 DC, Leucippus and Democritus were the founders of the atomistic school. What they knew from this era that was that atoms were in motion, and also they were of different shape and size. Another philosopher who was interested about this topic was Aristotle. Aristotle was trying to show that there is no space. Actually, Aristotle don't believe that there was empty space. So he tried in every way to show that this notion is not exist. This dictum that nature abhors a vacuum is one of the main misconceptions of children of all ages. If you ask some children to draw some particles, what they can actually do is they can draw them very close one each other. So they may draw them very close, and because they don't believe there is empty space, or they fill the empty space with other particles of dust or air. Another reason why we choose that topic was because particles is something we cannot see in everyday life experiences. For example, in this room, we are surrounded by air, but we cannot see it. But as you know, air is a mixture of different particles, different in shape and size. Also, the particulate theory is related with many everyday life experiences. For example, boiling, evaporation, condensation, liquefaction. Every day, for example, every morning, we try to warm our water into a pot. As you can have a temperature in this pot, you can see how the water is transformed from liquid to vapors. This is a macroscopic observation, but you don't really know, or children don't really know what's going on in the micro level. Thus, without scaffolds as images and animations or other representational models, children cannot understand correctly and conceptualize what is going on in the macroscopic level. So, till now we understand that if we want to understand the particulate nature of matter, we need to have some skills. For example, overall, we must be visually literated. We must be visual intelligence. We must have the ability for visual reasoning, and also we must be abstract thinkers. To understand the particulate nature was accessed and evaluated through visual representations, dynamic simulations, and representational models. Each educator can use each one of these categories into his learning approaches, but still children should know that, for example, a representational model, it's not a replica of reality. It's a way of approaching the reality. So we realize that vision and imagery are very fundamental cognitive process in memory and of our memory and pure experiences. As you know, one image are thousand words, and this is true because images has a lot of information about phenomena and process. So it's very essential for children to interact with images and representations, because it's the only way to understand whatever happened in a micro level, for example, how would tiny particles behave and all these invisible changes. So what teachers always try to do is to link whatever happened in the microscopic level, how these changes are related with the macroscopic changes. That means children have to understand how the temperature and the particles movement change in the micro level of what we can observe in our everyday life experiences, and also to link all these aspects with symbolic representations. This is the way teachers try to interact with students, and it's widely used around the world. If we want to understand the particulate theory, first we have to understand the stages of matter. And as you can see in the first picture, we have a solid. Solid has some specific characteristics. First of all, it's called a specific shape and has a fixed volume. What is the difference between a solid and a liquid? A liquid, it has the shape of the container and a fixed volume. And finally, a gas is take the shape of a container and the volume of a container. All these states of matter are different, but they have some specific characteristics that are the same in the three conditions. For example, even we are in a solid or even in the liquid or in the gas state, all particles are the same. So that means we have the same amount of particles and the same shape and size of particles in each one of these stages. This is something very important students must know. So let's go through some animations. Firstly, we can see how solids behave. In the solid phase, particles are vibrating around their equilibrium position. You can see now how it's going. We don't have an internet. Okay. Now our video is going to open. As you can see in the picture, we have a solid and we have a magnifying glass in which you can see the particles and how particles will move around their equilibrium positions. I think I will continue because this is not working. So in the liquid stage, what's changing actually it's just that in liquid phase particles are sliding on each other, but we still have the same numbers and size of particles as we have before. Finally, in gaseous phase, as you can see, we still have the same style of particles, the same shape and the same size, but what it changes is the distance among them and all the intensity of their movement. So, what was the purpose of this research? What we actually do, we investigated 8th and 9th grade students, pictorial representations, and textual explanations concerning air changes following heating air in a sealed container. Actually, we invest their ideas before and after heating in a sealed container. So, how we go through our scenario? Firstly, we form kits that we have a sealed container in condition of full air, and we put it on one side of it to our balance. From the other side, we say to the kits that we put some weights. So we have a balance that was the condition of balance. So in the phase 2, we say kits that we take off this sealed container of the balance and we put it in summer for many hours so that it finally had a high temperature. Then we say kits that we put this back to the balance in the same place, and in the other side was also the same weight. So we asked children to choose one of these 4 optionals. So what would they would think would happen? In the first picture, you can see that the container is weighed more. In the second one, that is of the same equilibrium. In the third, that the container is less than it was before, and they can choose the answer I don't know. Also, we ask them to give us a further explanation about their choice. Finally, we say kids that they were equipped with magnifying glasses so that they could observe the invisible air in the container and then before and heating and after heating. And we ask them to depict, to draw their observations, and also to give some verbal explanation about their drawings. So, what we were expected was that that children should know that this container wasn't empty, but was consist of airs. Second, we would love children to know that air is a mixture of different particles in different shape and size, and that there is not a continuous nature. Also, we would love children to understand that there is a distance among the particles, and also there's space among them. So, also, as we know from Democritus, particles are in a continuous movement and are not suspended in space. Finally, we would love them to know that gases occupy all the space of the container, and their molecules behave differently from molecules of solids and liquids. After heating, children should know that the two-hour balance remains balanced and nothing was going to change. What was going to change, that the distance, the intensity of the movement was going to change. That means changes to the energy of the particles, and also students should know there is empty space among the particles. So the balance was going to remain balanced, and just we have the same air, the same shape and the same size of particles. Why we go through representations and we didn't go only verbal explanations? According to Clark and Paivio, through their dual coding theory, it's important to represent many concepts in science classes. So that means expressing the same idea both visually and verbally actives an interplay between visual and verbal representation. If I'm a child and someone asks me to represent the same context, even visually and verbally, that means when I'm doing my drawings and when I'm writing down what I know about these topics, I can make a correlation between them. If my drawing is not similar, whatever I know, whatever I write about this concept, that means I didn't understand well that concept. That means whatever I was thinking I know is what I actually know about this topic. Further, these representations can also trigger another interaction from whatever is internal of my cognitive structure with external representation. When we speak about internal representations, in whatever we have in our mind, whatever are images, mental images, schemas, connection, and networks. Internal representation can active cognitive operation For example, we can add some numbers, or they have information that can be directly retrieved. Oppose external representation are whatever we have in our environment, are pictures, symbols, rules, or relations embedded in physical configurations. We have two kinds of external representations, the depictive one and the descriptive one. The first is related with our visual channel, are all these pictures, drawings, sculptures, or physical models we can see around or we can make by ourselves. From the other side, all these related with our verbal channels are all these written text, expression, mathematical equation, and logical expression. The important with external representation that we can extend them in space and time. When I'm making a representation, that means I can have it for a long period. I can share it with other people. I can discuss about it. I can use several tools to it, and I can duplicate and rearrange them. They also are enable for active perceptual operation, and they may also have invariant information that can be directly perceived. So, the point is that external representation can pick up, analyze why internal representation has to be retrieved from memory by cognitive activity. We have a lot of benefits of external representation because there is no other way to understand our internal representation. Each professor or each teacher cannot understand what a child knows if a child don't give any kind of representation, even this is external, descriptive one or a depictive one, as I mentioned before. According to Clever and IVLA, verbal responses are not as strong as mental images because they are not unable of spatial transformation. That's this interplay between verbal responses is not as dynamic as when an external depictive representation interacts with the mental image. For example, the descriptive representation of the word pyramid can be only linked with the shape or of a pyramid, mental image, external depictive representation. So, as I mentioned before, we have an interplay of our internal representation with a verbal one or even with a visual one. Further, as I mentioned, external representations can interact among them. That means a visual image can interact with a text, or images can interact between them. So this contribution is bidirectional. If I have a verbal material, that can cause the creation of visual representations, while the visual material can cause the creation of verbal representations. In the picture, you can see the abstract task space, and from the one side you can see our internal representations which resist in a person's mind, and from the other side you can see the external representations with the resist on an external medium. So we have all this interaction between internal representation, between external and the internal interact with the external one. So as I mentioned before, that was our scenario. The first thing we choose to see what if children think that this is going to be an equilibrium between the weights and the container of it, if something was going to change, and the second one was to make some drawings.
So, dear colleagues, are you science teachers? Are you science teachers?
I'm a science writing.
Science writing. So, the science teachers, as we are, we're talking about this myth. We say, look here, what do you see inside this container? Do you see anything? But we do want students to understand that inside the container there is air. And of course, we insist that air is a mixture of two other different gases. And we're talking about these things. And now we come to visual literacy. of course, students memorize things and they express these ideas and so on. But how do we know that they correctly conceptualize what we are talking about? What they know inside their head, inside their brain, is called internal understanding, internal cognitive structures, internal representation. How do you know? Is it possible to conduct an EEG, electroencephalogram, in order to understand what they have in mind? No. So you tell them, please tell me, what do you see if you have magnifying glasses inside this container when I see it? These are the things that we talk in the class with kids of 12, 13 years old. And the main thing is that when students say that I see this and that and so on, we never know whether they memorize or not. So there is an interesting story. Can we make their thinking visible? So we told them, okay, this is the container. And please, inside the container, now I'll show you the container. This is the container. Can you draw inside the container what you imagine? Because in reality, these tiny particles cannot be seen. But these are the stories that science is talking about. Do you understand what I mean? So, we have in reality two kinds of externalizing students or people's ideas. One is to describe what they see, and the other one is to make some drawings. This is the essential thing. So, if we compare, let's say, what they describe in, what they describe, only here, we cannot show there. Okay, so if we compare their drawing of what they describe, then we can understand to what extent they really conceptualize the science content. Is it clear? First of all, look at this drawing. This refers before heating and after heating. And of course, we're not trying to teach you science, but we're trying to explain to what extent drawings or visuals can be used in teaching and learning. Here we say that, first of all, it seems that those dots, these tiny particles from which air consists, are almost the same, or probably here are smaller or bigger and so on. If they have different kinds of these particles, then we say they understand that air is a mixture. Do you follow me? So, but if these dots, let's say, are all of the same shape, then we conclude that they don't understand that air is mixture. It's not just one thing, it's more than one thing. And later on, if we continue, and you see how they represent material, you see, this is the container. Where's my container? And the container is sealed, okay? First of all, because it is sealed, after heating it, nothing goes out or nothing enters. But from their own understanding, after heating, nothing is there. So they think that after heating, the air disappears or vanishes. And there is also another important story. Because if we compare what they draw here with their textual description, we see to what extent there is a kind of consistency. Remember, we are trying to find ways to understand what they have in their brain. Can you understand what I have in my brain? If I don't speak, if I don't say anything, if I don't dance, if I don't do anything, if I don't externalize, nobody can understand what exists in my mind. But in school, the most important thing for the teacher is to raise a question. They accept any answer, even when the students do not understand or they memorize, and everything is nice. But this way, students are not learning. First of all, they are not learning. Why? Because children are not thinking the same way we think. When I speak to you, every one of you interprets the meaning depending on your background. You are science fiction, you know something. Science writer, so you know something about, but other people who do not have any contact with science, how do you expect them to understand? This is very simple. And this is true even for the children, and so on. So, in reality, when I hit this container, the mass or the weight will be exactly the same. Because this is what we say to the kids. But in reality, if you go back, you see some of them thought that the balance will lean towards the weight. Because they conceptualize that hot air is lighter. Although nothing can go in and out from the container. This is even logically, it's not correct.
And when you teach drawing also? You draw the concept before they draw their understanding, or what do you do?
First of all, this is a very important question. I am totally constructivist. I wouldn't teach anyone. I wouldn't speak even to you without knowing who you are. Because I would ask the students from the beginning, without teaching them, to make this exercise in order to understand the way they think. Are you teachers? And then I will try to tell them, okay, we are in science. Let's conduct an experiment. How do we know? This is also epistemological development. You as a student should not depend always on the teacher. The most important thing is to become an autonomous learner. Lifelong learning. The changes in our society are so rapid that if we finish the school and we think that we know everything and we don't continue learning, we lost everything. This is not the meaning of the American slogan, no child left behind. Information is not important. Processing the information, learning how to learn are the important things. So, I will come there and say, okay, this balance is leaning towards there. Why do you think that where became heavier? This is important for me. Do you understand my point? And of course, if we are in the same class, somebody says the air will become lighter, or the air will become heavier, or the weight or the mass will not change. Is it possible all these three explanations to be correct? Obviously no. So how do we know? Let's move on. Examine the theory. Conduct experiment. This is the way we learn. It's not just to tell you the truth. It's just to help you to find out by yourself what is correct and what is wrong. This is the way we should teach. Learning how to learn. Not memorizing, not rehearsing, not remembering. These are not important issues. Did I give you an answer?
Of course.
Okay.
I know the answer, but I just wanted to know this group of children.
This group
if
of
they,
children?
You know, they are 12, 13 years old, so how they learn all this
Of course, but this
material.
is the important issue. All over the world, at the science curriculum, this content exists.
Of course.
And in most of the cases, we start teaching the kids these abstract ideas, invisible processes, and so on. And we expect them to learn. This is totally unbelievable. How we treat our students in the class is very important. Everybody knows that at this age, people are concrete thinkers. They cannot think abstractly. Even for older people, this is very difficult. Why we continue to mistreat our children in the school? As parents, we know that when the kids enter the educational system, they are excited. They want to learn. They want to go to school. But finally, the school is becoming boring. Testing, and memorizing. This is the important issue. Because we have to change and we have to understand how children think. They don't think the same way we think. They have their sensory literacy. Have you been to the keynote speech in the morning? They have different sensory work. Sensory literacy is really very, very important. And of course, when you are a child, how you are learning from outside, from the world? Mainly through your vision. You are looking around. Who is my mother? Who is my father? What I'm doing here? You are learning a lot of things, using your senses. Later on, at the school, we forget everything. We depend only on oral communication. We just talk and talk. And then later we say, but we use computers. But even the way you use the computer is very important, because you cannot use ICT uncritically. What is the added value of using information communication technology? These are important issues for teaching, not for science, but for any subject. Even for any child, if you ask a child, okay, you have something in mind, this is a very, please tell me a few things about it. Okay, write it down. And then make a drawing. If you see any inconsistency, you can ask the child to compare the drawing with the texture. Very soon they will realize that there is a kind of inconsistency. And by themselves, they should refer to what they have internally, the so-called internal representation, and they will try to accommodate, if we use the terminology from psychology. Why we depend only on repeating or remembering or rehearsing the material? This is not learning. This is old-fashioned learning that should be abandoned for other important approaches. Because the lady here mentioned testing, there is an important question. Do we prepare our students to be successful in testing or to be successful in life?
That's what they are doing to us. Interesting.
No, I don't accept
No, I know.
that they are doing for us. We live in a democratic society. And unfortunately, as far as I know, during the recent American elections,
How you
only
measure
37% of the people voted. So they told the other, please decide whatever you like and I am with you. This is not a democratic society, because the overwhelming majority was at home, not participating, not expressing opinions, whatever. nobody can impose on us in democracy what he wants, unless we vote for him. You see my point?
I understand.
Okay. So, are you with me till now? Yes.
So I'm going to ask a question about what you just said, because I happen to agree with you. I think probably most of us know how they got to the point of testing, because they were graduating people from high school who were functionally illiterate. So they backed up and said, okay, to stop that, we're going to start testing people to try to get them earlier. And it seems like it's now all become about passing the test, like that's the measurement. So if you were going to change that and use visual literacy in some of the things you're doing, how do you go about doing that? To say that when a child has been in school for a certain amount of time, they have actually learned something, they've become educated in something.
So, no. This
But
is,
that's the reality.
appoint me President of the United States.
You
I'll
won't know
appoint you.
anything, unfortunately.
I'll appoint you today.
We have a strong Congress, a strong Senate.
No.
But I know everything from your country because I have been living here for 7 years. I was a doctor in New York as a professor at that university.
The thing
So,
is about science. How do you make science be interested? Because that's the problem. We are not having children who are interested in science. One point you said is very good, to do lab and
to boost their interest,
experiment.
their
Exactly. That's the
imagination,
thing.
excitement.
Exactly.
And now you have
And
a
the
strong
drawing and
of
all
what
Use
to
all-
interact because
All
I
right,
have
so
to
now
give
I
an
have to say
answer to the
something.
lady.
Because I think it's true by the time you get in the 8th and 9th grade, kids are like that, but I don't think kids are like that when they're younger. Right, when they're younger, they are eager to learn. They start school, they want to know everything, they're very curious.
Exactly.
and they're
So
very open.
why we do
So-
all the necessary things to keep their interest, their motivation? Learning should be enjoyable.
That's right, and that's
But
exactly.
if you
that's
want,
right.
I will offer you free lessons in science teaching, and then you will see how interesting is science. How do we do these things to be important? Every every person is interested to understand, to correctly conceptualize what is happening. I don't care whether they use the appropriate words or whatever, but whether they have a deep understanding of these processes of what is happening around us. And the important thing is that, because this is another story, knowledge is power. This is an American slogan again. But when knowledge is power, when I can repeat it, or when I use this knowledge to solve everyday problems. We have electricity, we have refrigerators, we have cars, we have airplanes, we have a lot of other things. We have medicine, we have all this science. Can we live without science? No. Is it possible for all of us to become scientists? No. But at least we should appreciate what science is doing for our society. Because science is an important catalyst for change. Going back to the lady there, first of all, we need teachers who should be professionals. And as far as I know, there is a shortage of science teachers and mathematics teachers in the United States. And the majority of those teachers are from Egypt, from India, from Greece, from Italy, and so on. And the minority are really Americans, born Americans. Why these things happen? Do we really believe that no child should be left behind? No. Everybody knows that the majority of children are left behind. We are not willing to compensate for their home environment. We are not willing to pay for education. And you see the battle in the Congress. Education, educating the future generation is really very important. It's not important only for Americans. Do you know why? Because America depends on brain drain. But in Europe, they tried to stop it. At some point, even the American nation, United States of America, should find ways to invest on education, to educate children, to be successful in life, not to be successful in tests. It's not the same. It depends on the kind of testing as well. I'm not against testing, but if you test just for memory information, for memorization, like to waste the time and the money for doing such a thing. I also know some other extraordinary stories. I was in a conference, American Educational Research Association, and the speaker said, fortunately, it was in the competition of Cyprus and Saudi Arabia. For me, it was astonishing. I am from Cyprus. And then I raised the question, sir, what do you mean, fortunately, Cyprus and Saudi Arabia participated in that competition? He told me, you see, 41 countries participated in team 1995. You can check the story. United States were at the 39th position. Cyprus was at the 40th position. And the last country was Saudi Arabia. Is it good for our nation not to be able, our students, to compete internationally with the Chinese, the North Korean, the Finnish, the so on and so on? This is reality. We have to face reality. We have to find appropriate ways for educating our children. And of course, we need teachers. We need professional teachers. We need to support them. We need to transform them into professionals. We need to involve them in action research to test their ideas. If my idea of teaching works, then go on. But if it does not work, now we know that the American educational system is not successful. Look at the international competition, teams, PISA, and so on. You will see that I'm not accusing the United States. I'm just explaining the outcomes of these competitions. So, is it good for us to neglect the future of our country or the future of our children because some legal or illegal immigrants will come to this country and take the positions that will be vacant? Is it enough? No. So, although we diverted from here, but here we see something else. Look here. We say these stories. Here, when I was at the university, my teacher was saying, my professor, do you see what I see? But I don't see anything. No, you should see what I see. I see millions of tiny particles moving around and doing things and so on. Why do you expect a child to believe this story? At least make this visible using simulations that we couldn't use. And suddenly the kids, because we forgot something, these children have been already taught the relation of solids, liquids, gases, and how they are transformed from one phase to the other. But now they see, this is the drawing. We say that air consists of tiny particles. Where are the tiny particles? They don't believe it. So they go back to their own interpretation. So from this point of view, we are not successful. And despite the fact that we have a lot of tools in order to cultivate their understanding. I referred to the keynote speech earlier, multi-sensory learning, listening passively to what the teacher is saying is not learning. the learner should be actively engaged in the learning process, using not only hands-on, but only minds-on things. Otherwise, we are losing the battle of educating the future generation. And of course, at that time I was in the United States. You remember where the Russians launched the first satellite to the moon. And you see that the famous book, Nation at Risk. Do you know this story? At that time, because the Russians were the first to go to the moon, everybody in the United States was, because the nation was at risk. And then they started investing money for education. As soon as they went forward, now nobody's interested for education. Why?
It's political.
Of course it's political.
Anti-science.
Of course it's political, but we are responsible for what is happening politically.
Yeah, but we train kids to be skeptical of science. You've got evolution's not being taught, global warming's being denied. You know, a huge amount of the society is political to even support good science.
Political means we are involved, because we are political animals.
Yeah. But
We
we've tossed,
accept-
that's the one subject we've tossed up,
Okay.
politics.
But it's not how we teach, it's how we teach everything. This is, science is not a kind of dogmatic knowledge that we try to transfer from my head to the heads of the children. The children are not tabula rasa. The children should be taught in a children-centered approach, in a constructivistic way.
Yeah, and you're right, because a lot of times, children who question too much tend to irritate the teacher, right? So, in trying to understand, if they keep asking questions to try to understand, that disrupts the classroom.
Well,
And
you
that
see-
could be part of it too.
Of
That's
course,
also
I do
teachers'
know,
responsibility.
even our own kids, when they raise a lot of questions, we are angry with them, because they want to learn.
Right.
Although we spend a lot of money to educate them. Do you know the history of Einstein? Einstein was not a good student, was not good in mathematics, because always he was questioning things. And some people said that this has some problems with the eye. And finally, he was the guy who defined science as the ignorance, then belief in the ignorance of the expert. You, the teacher, is the expert. But I'm not willing to submit to his own idea. It's my own understanding of things. This is me. I have a different sensory work, and I interpret things differently. And you have to scaffold me to understand or to face reality. And in science, this is, of course, very easy. So, I'm not sure whether we have time, but I prefer to answer your own questions in case you have. Although we skip the important things for here, but of course, if you go on, you see that we teach children several things. Look here, in the simulation or previous, we mentioned that these are the particles of air. Yeah, because the particles move totally freely, they should occupy the whole space. This is what we are teaching in the classroom. But we use only words. We don't use drawing. We don't use simulation. We don't invest on technology. We don't use visuals. And this is exactly the focus on visual literacy, which is very important for our learning. And later on, you see another story. And here, suddenly, no, let's find something more interesting. Look here. After heating, initially, there are no particles at all. as if the container was empty. But suddenly, because we heat it, these tiny particles try to escape. And if they move out, here is a totally empty space. But this is contrary to what is written in the textbook or to what we teach. So why we don't use complementary, some drawing, some visual, to make our thinking visible in order for this concrete thinker to understand what we are talking about. And if you go on, you will find a lot of interesting things, but because we are not science teachers and we don't have enough time, in some cases they say that if we hit there, then suddenly water will appear here. How is it possible? If we hit water, water becomes vapors. Now we hit the vapors and they become water. Unbelievable. But these are students' conception after teaching, not before teaching. And the problem is that previously, before we start teaching, we do not know how they think. We try to impose our knowledge and our understanding on their own thinking, framing students' thinking. I heard many times today, why do we want to frame students' thinking? We have to trigger their thinking, their curiosity, their imagination. Because this is how we create another Einstein. Einstein was thinking, what will happen if I travel on a ray of light? He had this magnificent theory. But he was a peculiar kid. So we treat our kids as if they were peculiar. Because they want to know. And because we impose on them our own thinking without respecting their own understanding, finally the school is boring. This is reality. Now, let's suddenly look here. From ancient Greece, Democritus said that these tiny particles do not change. They move faster, or they increase the distance between them. But here the student says that after heating, these particles become bigger, contrary to what we are teaching. What kind of communication do we have in the classroom? If I stand here and I repeat and lecture and do things without giving and taking information from you, without having feedback, what am I doing? Can I teach in front of an empty classroom? What is the difference when I have kids in front of me? If I don't communicate with them, if I don't provide feedback, if I don't get information of how they think, how much time is used in the classroom for the children, not for teachers' speech and lecture, for the kids, because they have to develop language skills. They have to develop thinking skills. Do they think in the classroom? Do they participate in communication? Do they share the time? No, everybody knows, but we are reluctant to change. Now, we should come here. If you are interested for this kind of work, this is an email there. I can share with you all the information. And be aware that vision and visual literacy is very important. In reality, how several images or concepts are seen and represented, in most of the cases, in the eyes of imagination. Because we're talking about particles, we're talking about tiny things that we cannot see. We're talking about the micro world. But this is how our mobile phones, TVs, or telecommunications depend on. In reality, this is a kind of art. This is a kind of higher order thinking. It's not remembering. It's not rehearsing. It's deep understanding and constructing meaning for themselves, for the student. We can help students construct meaning, but they should construct meaning by themselves. Because they have their own understanding, they should become autonomous learners, and so on and so forth. And this is the future of our society. We should not always depend on brain drain, waiting from Romania, India, and so on, to educate people and send them here to take positions at the university, in the labs, and so on and so forth. Because at some point they may decide to keep these people there back in their countries.
Did you see any differences in the interest among the children, girls and boys? You have like a graph of
Yeah. So
what did you see?
Irene forgot to mention something. He's a very good doctoral student of mine. He's trying to learn English as well. But now we design how to teach kids. So we have a group of kids that we teach them very highly provoked, using visuals, taking previous information, doing things, and then compare them with other students who will be taught by the traditional way, and to see to what extent we have better results. If we don't have better results, we go back to the traditional way. But if we invest on simulations, on visuals, and so on, and we have much better understanding and excitement by the teacher, by the student, who will follow or suggest that our approach is much better. And there is another story. In the schools internationally, we put so much emphasis on the cognitive domain. Knowledge. Knowledge is the important. We neglect students' feelings or the affective domain. If the student is afraid of the teacher, if the student is afraid to make mistakes, then he's not willing, he's reluctant to express his ideas because we condemn his ideas automatically. We don't try to test his ideas or to put these ideas into test and decide finally, based on evidence, which of these ideas are correct. So we're talking about democratic school, but are our schools democratic, really? Is it a place where the kids, without being afraid, without having psychological pressure or social pressure, can express their idiosyncratic ideas? Because if you express your ideas, you have the chance to correct them, to compare them. But if you are reluctant to express your ideas, you will keep them forever. You will memorize the material for the teacher to have a grade, to pass the exam, to go to the next grade, but you will never cultivate a deep understanding of what we are talking about, and you are not going to develop thinking skills and reasoning that are really very essential in every democratic society. So, did you decide to appoint me as President of the United States? No. No problem.
Oh, we the head of the education.
Huh? I had a material game. But I do understand there was a young lady, what was her name? She was a teacher by the age of 11.
Michelle,
Oh, no.
no?
Okay, forget. Who wanted to be appointed as General Secretary of Education? So it was a pleasure to have you here. We apologize because the material was very abstract, but we think that we said a good message. If you have any questions, we are here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. I stopped, although I enjoyed this thing, because we don't have time. I could go on for some years.